Where to begin this story? For myself, it really begins back in 1990 with the Sega conversion of the game Ultima 4. A landmark in entertainment history, it remains famous to this day for being one of the first games to be based around learning moral lessons rather than just killing or looting in pursuit of a high score. It was influential not just to a teenage me, but to tens of thousands of gamers around the world, due to the revelatory, for the time, depth of plot, its evocative setting, and wistful dreaming of a better world somewhere else. So much so, that when in 2013 the promise of a spiritual successor to the long-dormant Ultima series of games appeared on the webpage Kickstarter, made by some of the same development team, and promising to recapture the same sense of meaningful gameplay, it was not only rapidly funded at nearly double the requested total, but was the second most successful Kickstarter for that year as a whole. As of making this video, 4 years after it was supposed to have been completed, the game still hasn't finished even the first promised episode, despite earning somewhere around $28 million, and it has on average only 200 people online at any one time. Why is the game such an expensive failure? Well, we could talk about, and later in this video I will briefly touch upon the myriad issues with both deliberate deception and plain programming incompetence. But let's just begin the setup to the headline claim of this video, as it might have appeared in Ultima 4 all those years ago. Moral choice time. Thou hast sworn to follow Mammon in all. Ye covet even the most vulnerable backer's last coin, conspiring with those of criminal intent to harass the appalled. Dost thou A. refuse to attend a summons from justice, or B. attempt to act with honour and explain thy deeds under oath? That's a tough one, isn't it? Act honourably and respect oaths, or just don't turn up to court when told to attend? I think the moral thing to do is run off from justice even now. And if you're wondering what on earth I'm talking about, on the 30th of July 2018 I registered a case with the American Arbitration Association because Portalarium had actively and openly conspired with an individual who has spent the last 2 years stalking and harassing me, hacking into my accounts, attempting to encourage myself towards suicide, sent rape and death threats to an ex-girlfriend, and suggested harm will come to my family because I dared to criticise the game Shroud of the Avatar. Portalarium not only agreed to engage in harassment by closing access not just to the game itself, but even the account management page, but it's also my belief that they quietly informed my stalker they had done so he could run around the internet bragging how, we both know it's thanks to me that you've lost everything. By September the 4th, 2018, after attempting to get Portalarium to respond to the summons multiple times, and even extending the deadline to try and give them the opportunity to show an honest attempt to engage, the Arbitration Association were forced to close the case, informed Portalarium they were no longer part of the scheme, and ordered them to remove any reference to the Arbitration Association from their user licensing agreement. At the time of making this video, nearly 2 months after Portalarium were ordered to remove that accreditation, and knowing full well I have copies of the legal correspondence too, Portalarium was still claiming their backers have arbitration coverage in the EULA. They do not. Portalarium are even now lying about something as serious as this, simply to try and escape consequences for supporting harassment of critics. So in this video, I'm going to discuss the long, hard path to even getting this small measure of justice, what it's like to run into someone so mentally unwell he'll dedicate 2 years of his life to trying to harm you, the difficulties in prosecuting someone even when you know a company can identify him but don't want to because they like what he's doing, the impossibility of discussing it when doing so is one of the mechanisms used to silence you further, the further problem of the degraded sense of morals online and sheer lack of intelligence in dealing with it, how the media either doesn't want to know or, when you can prove what you say, will dare take the risks unless you further do it yourself, and so much more besides. I'm not going to leave screenshots up for long though, so as to not inflate an already exhaustive video, but hopefully long enough for you to pause upon them if you wish to read in detail later. So let's get into the wider context. I was not always a critic of the game. In fact, I've actually worked as paid staff on Richard Garrett's former product, Ultima Online. I was a fiction writer, or what was called an event manager there. Indeed, I actually worked an event with Garrett himself when he first returned to the game as Lord British. He probably doesn't know that because he didn't actually speak to any of the lower level staff that day. But you can see me communicating with players while standing in his honour guard as EM Gotan here. Some of the money earned for working for Broadsword at the time I pumped into Shroud. More than that though, I also submitted artwork for the heraldry scheme in game, helping design the cows that are shown here. Amusingly, if you look at the actual thread it was submitted in, the images have been hidden, but a Google cache can still find it. And I also submitted some poetry that I wrote specifically about a Shroud in-game character, which was planned to be, but ultimately abandoned as content for the in-game books, because Portalarium didn't want to reward anyone for their submissions. By August 2015, however, I'd become so disgusted with Portalarium that I sold off my pledge in order to withdraw as much support as I possibly could. What went wrong? Well, the same as went wrong for all the backers who fled this dishonest disaster of a product. Kickstarter is supposed to be a process by which you get the total funding to develop a final product, and Richard Garriott at the time in interviews made specific promises that the game would never go down the microtransactions route, that it would be a buy-to-own game. However, Portalarium apparently knew right from the start that they wanted to build a mobile-style product instead, one with a permanent add-on store with almost all of the content and the in-game economy itself based around selling people endless new virtual rares for real money that they could then resell to each other. A real money trading or RMT based game. Remember how in Ultima 4 you gave away your gold to the sick and the poor because it was the moral thing to do? Remember how the people profiteering off each other were the villains of that story? Well, if ever the staff of Portalarium ever really believed that, they've long since abandoned any sense of decency. Now they think any lie is acceptable to tell, as long as it keeps the money rolling in for them personally. By 2014, videos were already surfacing where they admitted they'd only gone to the Kickstarter to, quote, get out of the pickle, end quote, of near bankruptcy that their previous failed mobile product, Ultimate Collector, had led them into. By early 2015, we now have evidence that they were selling access to the revenue from the add-on store to get short-term funding for more current pickles. In the contract with Russian partner Black Sun, they openly admit the aim is to string early access out as long as possible and then officially switch to a free-to-play model. But because they've built it as an MMO with a central server, when the central server switches off, everyone loses everything, including the tens of thousands of dollars of rares you may have purchased. Although I personally came a little late to the realization compared to some, in 2015 Portalarium started deliberately manipulating even the pledge upgrades from the Kickstarter, and that was the final straw for me. The way it worked was that if you didn't increase to a set level of spending by a series of arbitrary dates, you lost all the most desirable items from every higher pledge level forever. You can see my thread expressing my disgust for that here. Remember this thread, we'll come back to it later. But apart from a single post pointing out that the most famous real money trader, and now the only person left trying to generate hype for the game online, one Vladimir Bezhimov, was deliberately using their forums to harass me, I never comment on their official forums again after this post. After I left, Portalarium just got scummier and scummier. They claimed to be raising money for charity, but planned to keep 90% of the cost of the sales to themselves, and didn't even commit to handing over the rest until a later date of their own choice. They'd run partner sales for companies that were the second jobs of their own staff. The wellness app, for instance, is built by former colleagues who'd worked on Ultima 7. Brightlocker employs Stalking, one of the main Shroud developers. The seed invest that they ran later, in order to gain even more pickle funding from encouraging backers to become investors, not only sold golden castles for $30,000, but a guy called Bradley Harrison sits on both the seed invest and the Portalarium boards. And when GamesIndustry.biz reported on how the seed invest would be an utterly foolish investment, Portalarium went back and deleted the quoted risk sections from the seed invest, thus hiding from investors their actual true financial condition. They are an utterly unethical, deliberately deceptive, unendingly greedy company, and they have deliberately protected and I suspect had encouraged someone waging a 2-year campaign of harassment against me and my loved ones simply because I criticise them for failing to live up to any sort of standard of decency and development. Now, let's talk about the facts that led to Portalarium being thrown from the arbitration scheme for avoiding attending, because they knew they'd lose the case, and to why I can state categorically that they have conspired with a criminal out of petty spite. I recommend you now watch my previous video, Shroud the Avatar developer forges crimes and treats harassment as a joke, as a quick primer on the background, as well as being the specific trigger for the response which led to Portalarium not even daring to face me in court. Here's the quick preface of that video. Portalarium have been informed by multiple backers over many years that a user owning an account called Jammer Player on their forums had been harassing critics, and specifically attempting to make them afraid for the safety of their children, even going as far as sending the schools those children go to through their official forums. In my personal case, they had also been informed he'd hacked into my email address, likely from sheer details he got from Portalarium's records somehow, was making threats about a vulnerable ex-girlfriend he'd read about in said emails, and was openly gloating online that he was using Portalarium in his attempts to harm myself. Well, with full knowledge of these reports, one of the developers of Shroud, one Chris Spears, thinks it's then funny on a public forum to turn around the cries for protection against harassment and claim it's all being done to him instead, on forums that didn't even exist at the time he claims it happened, so it's obviously bollocks. Now, let me just acknowledge first of all that Portalarium can't technically or legally be held to account for what the fruitcake behind all of this is actually doing outside of their own areas of control or influence. But just so you're aware of the kind of genuinely mentally ill and uncontrollably obsessive fuck-up that he is, here is just a sample of what he's been up to in the wider world since I published the video above back in March 2018. So for instance, do you see the user travelling site there in the comments on that video? Yes, that turned out to be yet another sock puppet attempting me to doubt my sanity after it turned up on Reddit and tried to persuade me I was somehow persecuting him, even though until recently I've made sure to never ever communicate with obvious sock puppets. And here's another sock puppet, one Frost-centric Motoroid, attempting to at first forge my being transphobic, then trying to subtly gloat that he hoped he was making me feel suicidal, and then just going batshit insane and admitting that yes, it was him again all along, and something about complaining to Mom. Who the hell knows what goes off in the mind of a one-off man-mental. On the 9th of April, he was trying to reset my password on the Carpe Ludum forums. That one is particularly pathetic because I'd only ever made a single post there, a request for supporting in setting up a gaming controller for a disabled client that I was caring for at the time. On the 19th of July, he spent at least an hour in the morning trying to shut my Minecraft account down. On the 8th of August, he actually got into my War Thunder account, probably because my original gauging account was set up years ago and had a much simpler variant of the password I'd also used with Portalarium, but he wasn't able to do any damage there, fortunately. On the 20th of September, he went after my Ubisoft account, and here he is making yet more accounts and making more stupid comments about the ex-girlfriend on Reddit, and more threats, admissions he's trying to work out what accounts I have online, and more claims of coming to personally harm me on multiple sock puppets on Eurogamer too. And here's a sample of him trying to get back into my email every week, and this goes all the way back to November 2016. And thanks to a private talk with Frontier, who developed the game Elite Dangerous, after the references to a Cobra Mark III, I was able to confirm that someone, gosh I wonder who, was spending up to 8 hours a day now trying to destroy a friend's faction in game, simply because I'm part of it. I'm just showing the titles there, by the way, because where I don't have permission to share the full communication, or it might compromise future legal actions, I'm going to respect confidentiality. Well, except for with Portalarium, of course, because, obviously, fuck those shysters. And so, remember, all of this is on top of what's happening with Portalarium directly. And how do I know he's doing that? Because he copied me into the correspondence of him organising with all of the major staff of Portalarium to ensure that I saw it and try to increase the harm done to me. So as I just said above, fuck Portalarium, the harassment supporting pricks. Here's the proof. After I published the video above, Jammer Player was driven into another of his endless frothing rages, and for the first time he not only sent abuse to me directly through Portalarium's official forums, in the form of one of his unhinged, incoherent comics, as well as the claims that he was happy he was somehow getting a former colleague on Ultima Online to doubt my sanity, but he also opened this following group chat with all of Portalarium and myself. If you've had the time to watch my prior video, well, that's the one he's reporting in here. And at 27 minutes and 30 seconds in said video, I list all of the evidence that he was caught purchasing accounts from backers who had quit the project, to then use those accounts as burnable ones to harass other people, including myself, upon. In particular, he'd purchased the account known as Sempiternal Dragon, and tried to forge claims on Reddit and elsewhere that I, or a few of the people he's obsessed with, owned it instead, but had been caught when friends of the original owner had demanded Portalarium change its name to stop slandering their friend with what he was saying. And he'd changed it to a name obsessed with me again, and then proceeded to rage against myself on it. Do you follow that? He's reporting a video to Portalarium which lists all of the evidence that they know he owns the Sempiternal Dragon account now, and demanding that they ban me in part because somehow that account is still really me insulting myself. It gets so much more pathetic and insane than what you've just seen, believe me. But two further points before we move on. Firstly, note how he's also clearly trying to gaslight Portalarium themselves at the same time. And notice too his signature there. Quote, "I'm everywhere," which is an open gloat about mass sock puppeting. Behind the scenes, and as always, he links to anybody who knows me this conversation to make sure that I see it, and I then turn up later and make sure to hammer home to all of the Portalarium participants in the conversation the known facts. Again, it comes up in the prior video, but Portalarium know full well I've got criminal reports on this individual because I had informed them directly as early as February 2017, and I've published the screenshots of me doing it. They also know who my lawyer in Austin, Texas is because they've got his contact details, and behind the scenes again we know that they've checked them because he's seen them looking at his LinkedIn. As for the search warrant, I'll talk more about that later as part of an overview of wider issues, but for now I'll just state that the officer in Austin, Texas that my lawyer was communicating with was willing to get a search warrant if, amongst other few issues, we could prove the evidence was hosted at Portalarium. Jammer Player was now doing his utmost best to give that possession of evidence in their offices to me, because he's copying me into the communication. The correct moral, or even just smart and self-protective path for Portalarium, even if they didn't give a shit about being fair, should be quite clear. I'm basically saying, don't fall for it, you idiots! But further down into madness the conversation then goes. His next response with this. Again, I want to come back to this later as part of the overview, but note how he's using the disgust generated with his stalking and harassment to try to further defame and harm the victims of his stalking and harassment. And if you also want a pure example of why victim blaming isn't just a culture wars buzzword, but a genuine tool of malicious gaslighting, well, there it is. Quote, "I've been forced to defend myself," and then he links directly to 5 of the comics written about me, as if I made him write them. British accents are just so sexy, I guess, that he was forced to sit there rubbing himself off about hobbits. Frankly, I wish he'd just check himself into a mental health clinic before he harms anyone else. I don't want him to keep acting this insanely. But on it goes. He then claims he's never threatened anyone's children. In the video above, remember that he's just reported in, at 17 minutes and 1 second, you can see how I shared with Portalarium's community moderator Beric the image where he's doing exactly that. There's more victim blaming, of course. And this is just a classic, isn't it? Quote, "In all honesty, I never intended to harass this person, although he makes it very difficult not to." So yeah, he admitted he was doing it and copied me into the proof he was admitting to Portalarium that he was. He's a smart guy, isn't he? Then he actually refers to the image that he's just denied he ever sent and claims he was just telling Rune 74 to move on and look after his children. Look after them because of what? Once more, my response is simply to point out that he's not just providing evidence of his own obsessive harassment of me, and even of others, but again that I've linked to Burek, to where he's openly bragging that he's using Portalarium themselves to assist in abusing the targets of his obsession on an account he's just admitted he owns. And then I offer Portalarium an easy way out. Withdraw and apologise for the claims I ever threatened Chris Spears' children, because they must know he can't prove that I ever did so. And it doesn't have to go any further. But because this particular lunatic just will not stop with the harassment, I will ensure that he is stopped before he can carry out any of the threats with the information I know that he has. And Portalarium other people who can identify him. It will come through them. In the next comment, pause the video here and really sit and savour the kind of madness that I've been having to deal with for the past 2 years. Go ahead, but make sure to scrub yourself off afterwards, or he'll use the stink of his own foul personality after it makes you feel dirty to try and make you look mad too. 2 quick points on that one again though. He's used multiple sock puppets, including one called Starman2112, which I'm pretty sure he also controls, to send me the links to his imager himself and thus avoid any attempt to block him, and then tried to forge me reading his bizarre rants about myself as my stalking him. And it's also very, very easy to find all the accounts where he's ranting about me. He's just linked to them himself, in fact, so Portalarium don't even have to try looking. It's only ever the names, not the content of his rants that change though, but I'll come back to this again later. So he keeps on ranting and getting even more incoherent. Again, pause here and savour once more if you can face it. As an aside, I've never been sure if he honestly doesn't know what he's doing, or if he's so driven by personality disorder he's deliberately contradictory in the hopes of further gaslighting people about what he really is doing and what has really happened. Make up your own mind, folks, as God knows he doesn't have a working one himself. By post 8, Portalarium finally responds in the form of Chris Spears. Remember that at this point, Portalarium have had my lawyer in Texas contact details for about 6 months or so before, but haven't contacted him. Nor had they responded to multiple efforts from myself going back to February 2017 to put them in touch with the police authorities dealing with the criminal reports on Jammer Player. And Chris Spears in particular is personally not only aware that I've made police reports on being hacked and then stalked, but that Chris Spears in particular has personally mocked those police reports on Reddit and elsewhere, and that in the video that Jammer Player has just reported, I've also published the evidence that he's done so. In fact, the whole video is based upon the fact that he went to Massively OP and forged claims that I was harassing his children there. But as you can see from the response, at this point I knew with a sinking feeling that yes, they were going to double down on the stupid, self-defeating but toxic hatred as a company again. Because no honest person claims to only now be aware of what you've been yelling at them to stop turning a blind to for more than a year now. But as you can see, I make one final effort to allow them a decent way out. The communication I'm talking about though was outdated with the action about to come and wasn't in the end sent so quickly. There was just no point trying to work with someone who, as you saw at the very start, was quite prepared to destroy their own reputation just to try and genuinely harm someone for hurting their narcissistic self-regard simply for pointing out their game is greedy, terrible crap. So the next legal missive was instead beginning the arbitration process. But we have a little bit more ranting before it happens. Again, pause for the fun. If you manage to get that, yes, the, quote, testimony of another user, supposedly self-harming because of how I'd been treating him, but who mysteriously all the quotes provided for Portalarium were anonymous, actually turned out to be yet another sock puppet of his. Well done, you're smarter than Portalarium. It's not very hard though, to be honest. It's an account called Tinsel the Kobold, by the way, and when he tried to forge this claim on a form he hoped I wouldn't see, most of Reddit, who'd already worked out who he really was, had already piled in to say what he was really up to. Simply enough to cross-check this, Portalarium, why didn't you bother? Instead, as mentioned at the start, even though it made no sense, put them in an unbelievably compromising position regarding liability, and was just an all-round shit-headed thing to do, they instead banned me from the game, the forums, even the account management page, informed Jammer Player that they'd done so, and thus encouraged him to run around the internet bragging about it. Here's a different place from earlier where he does that, by the way. The profile picture is a Canadian serial killer, just in case you were wondering whether he could squeeze even more toxic hatred in there too. Yes, of course he can. Notice though that he's talking about the game as well, and there's no way for him to know if I'm banned in game without being told that I've been banned. And at this point, I hadn't mentioned it publicly because I was waiting to see if Portalarium would tell him. That weekend, Portalarium were away for a gaming convention, so it took them a few days to retaliate against me, but we could all see them preparing for it. One user claimed he'd been PM'd by Portalarium and they told him they were going to act as soon as they got back to the office. Another caught one of the forum moderators, Serafina, desperately going through my entire posting history trying to find something to stick on me. Remember that last real post on the forum? Here she is reading it very, very closely before they send the ban email. A ban email which arrives Monday morning but doesn't quote any content justifying it because Portalarium don't have any. They do, however, claim that I'm making legal threats because apparently informing Portalarium that I've had to go to the police multiple times about harassment, and I've just seen them being copied into evidence which justifies claiming they're in a conspiracy to encourage it, is making a legal threat. Once more, victim blaming is indeed real. Now here's what happens behind the scenes afterwards. It took quite a while to communicate with my lawyer in Texas and decide upon a path forwards once we realised that Portalarium were actually going to double down on the hate-filled behaviour. After much debate we decided that going for the user agreement clause, because Portalarium had terminated my service with clearly dubious reasoning, would be the cheapest, if not the fastest route, and that they wouldn't have a hope in hell of defending it because Jammer Player directly copied me into his communication, as you've seen. And I'm also sitting on an ungodly amount of wider evidence because, well, 2 years of endless disordered obsession with somebody who desperately wants me to know that he's doing it. Under said user agreement, Portalarium requested 30 days of informal negotiations before deciding to initiate arbitration. I don't know if that's legally enforceable, however, to give them no room to wiggle out of it, you can see this email on June the 4th informing Portalarium that I accept this. You can also see I privately offer them a mutual position. If they actually stop protecting the lunatic obsessed with harming me, I will drop pursuing them on illegally terminating my service, and even keep quiet that I ever plan to do so. They get to look like they actually care, a position by the way I don't believe. They are shitheads, but if I can protect the people he's privately threatening, I will let them get away with that. And yes, I sent a paper copy by recorded delivery too. Someone at Portalarium's offices signed for it at 10:22 AM on June the 19th. So no excuses about the support at Portalarium email address that we all prior backers know is slow and useless. I know you also signed for it, you corrupt cunts. As a slightly amusing aside, it arrived in Chicago from the UK on the 9th, so it took twice as long to go from Chicago to Texas for a 1/3 A4 size envelope as it took to go from the UK to the US. Not exactly an impressive performance there, USPS. By now, you shouldn't be surprised to hear that Portalarium didn't respond to this either. So the 30 days of informal negotiation expired on the 4th of July 2018, a somewhat amusing coincidence for declaring my independence and being treated like dirt by these scummy developers. I delayed a little to seek as much legal advice as I could, and as mentioned at the start of this video, on the 28th of July I paid the $200 registry fee and notified Portalarium that I'd now begun the official, formal process of summoning them to the American Arbitration Association. You will see that I have ticked the box marked for punitive damages. This would be decided by the court, and frankly, even then, all I really wanted at this point was to force them to accept responsibility in a public legal document. But the US law system insists upon putting a price on everything, and you have to claim monetary compensation for pretty much any claim in order to make it valid. I have no idea how to put a value on all the stress, defamation, and just general anguish caused by realising people you once looked up to are greedy, hate-filled, incompetent shitmonglers. And it's never been about the money anyway, it's always been about protecting my loved ones. Portalarium, however, were quite prepared to burn down even their own user agreement to get out of admitting responsibility. And remember, they must know at this point that I'm getting copies of all the legal correspondence, but still, they don't respond. So here it is, here's the correspondence. On the 1st of August, it turned out that Portalarium had never even paid the required fee to review their use of the arbitration clause in their user agreement in the first place, and the $250 charge to do so was being added to Portalarium's required fees for attending my case. After noting that I had paid the consumer fees and completed all the required paperwork, Portalarium were then given until the 15th of August to complete their responsibilities under the process. On August 16th, Portalarium was still avoiding responding, and so the American Association gave them a 2-week extension to the deadline to try and prove their good faith. And here's where the US justice system really starts to get funky. As you can see, as the claimant, I was offered the opportunity to pay Portalarium's fees for them. Sadly, I don't have a spare $4,450 to do so. If I had, I'm so confident Portalarium would have lost and had to pay me back for doing so, I would certainly have paid the fees if I could. However, it was clear by now what kind of immoral, scummy people Portalarium were. And the company is right on the verge of bankruptcy as it is anyway. They're already carrying $13 million in debt that they can't service, even if they sold off all of their assets, according to the most recent SEC filings. So although the American Arbitration Association could perhaps take them to a second court to try and compel payment, there was no guarantee when, or even if, I'd actually get it back myself. Frankly, I fully expect them to try and stall long enough to either sell the game, dissolve the company, and then try and claim I couldn't hold them responsible as people for paying, or to try and escape reimbursement via bankruptcy. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't recall where in the Ultima series abusing loopholes in the law to try to avoid being held to account for being a colossal dick to innocent people was classed as a virtue. But by God, Portalarium are practicing that now. So, come the second deadline, they once more refused to attend or pay their expected fees, and as explained at the start, the American Arbitration Association closed the case and stated that they would be unlikely to ever accept a case involving Portalarium again. And Portalarium were then ordered to remove any reference to the Arbitration Association from their user agreement. And here's the really flabbergasting thing, the thing which it staggers the mind that somebody could be so corrupt or just so lacking in concern that they don't give any thought to this at all. Remember, I've known since September the 4th that Portalarium cannot legally claim arbitration coverage in their user agreement, that I have the legal proof that they have been lying and deceiving people for the last 2 months, and yet still, to this date, they have not updated the user license agreement. Unbelievable. So once more, fuck you, Portalarium. Seriously, fuck you. And vindication of the sort for me then in the end. I had to chase them all the way back to an American court and dare them to try and prove any of the bullshit they'd claimed about me personally, and nope, they didn't dare because it was all lies. As Charlie Sheen might say, winning! So is this where it ends though? God, wouldn't it be nice to think so? But you've seen just how utterly unable to let go of the obsession with me that my stalker has. Even when I've been utterly silent online because I was in the process of court action, simply still existing somewhere drives him into a rage. And the only people who can identify him for sure is still Portalarium, because they've got his credit card details at least. Remember, he's had to pay at least $5 to post on their forums. And as long as the threats towards my loved ones or attempts to damage my mental health still keep coming in, I still have to consider how I'll attempt to protect both in the future. So yes, there are still paths forward ahead, but because I don't want to compromise fighting those next, I'm not going to talk about them here. At least, not today. Instead, look for a follow-up to this video coming soon, where I want to talk about the wider issues involved in trying to prosecute this kind of harassment, of the hurdles faced when dealing with the law, the media, and even online communities who, you would expect, to appreciate forewarning of possible dangers to themselves or just their hobbies. But, as the length of this video should indicate, it's a long, hard road indeed. Tune in again soon if you're interested in the experiences of walking that road.